All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for those of you that are tuning into our channel. All right, we have a very special guest here. I'm very thankful that we're able to have someone that I know from a long, long time ago join us and provide some healthy, positive, educational information for all of us. So we have over here Kate. Kate is a licensed clinical social worker in LCSW joining us, and Kate's going to be giving us some good educational information. And I want to remind everybody that this is just educational information, right? So it's not to be used as medical advice, right? Please consult with your own doctor, primary care physician, healthcare provider, right, for your own information, right? This is all just educational, informative, and just to be kind of taken, just to support at this time, just as advice, but not to be used professionally. All right. So, Kate, do you want to just give a little background about just your history and just your own knowledge and skill set?
Yeah, so thank you so much for asking me to do the video. Danny and I have known each other for a very long time, so he reached out to me to talk a little bit today just about, I know that, a lot of parents are working right now and have your kids home with you and trying to manage that. So we're going to talk a little bit about some different ways that you can kind of manage some of the stress that's coming up right now and some of the emotions that are happening. Like Danny said, this is just educational information. If you need more individualized care, there's a couple of options for that. So I myself do video therapy. I'm actually located in California, but I previously am from New Jersey, so I'm licensed in both California and New Jersey. I do offer video therapy for people who are living in either one of those states. Danny's going to link some of my information below, so you can follow me on there. And then also, if you go on Instagram, you can message me directly. I'm on there as Counseling with Kate. But again, Danny's going to put that below. So I have been a licensed clinical social worker full-time for about 8 years now. I've done a variety of different things, from residential inpatient substance abuse treatment to having my own outpatient practice and pretty much every level of care in between. So I have a variety of experience in terms of helping parents with stressful times in particular, and really kind of addressing some of the thoughts and feelings and behaviors that would come up with an experience like this, that when you think about it is really kind of a global wide trauma that's taking place. And so how do we really manage what's coming up for us when we're having a traumatic experience that's coming at us? So Danny had some questions that I know he's going to go
Yeah.
over today, and I'm going to do my best to answer those. And then I think we'll open up the comments too later on if people have additional questions that we can try and support some of those.
Yeah, definitely. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And I love to, get your perspective on this, because as you said, it is such a global trauma that's happening, which, not many people have experienced before. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important to just get education and information out there so that people can kind of take care of themselves as much as possible. Right. So we do have some questions that I kind of accumulated from just seeing, different people reach out, or just in different groups, different comments, just regarding parents kind of dealing with this event. And so I'll read them out loud to you, and we could go one at a time and just, I guess as best as you're able to kind of, from your perspective, describe what you think is an appropriate response, will be the best. All right. So our first question is, so some parents have children with special needs. Sometimes there's even multiple children at home. And these parents might be feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, right? So the question is, how important is me time, and how can a parent find that time?
Yeah, so a couple of things here, I think. The first thing is, I always like to just normalize people's experiences with things. And right now, it is 100% normal if you're feeling exhausted, frustrated, burned out, annoyed, angry, or maybe some of you are feeling grateful or appreciative of this time that you have at home, this extra time with family, or, on these type of video calls I know some people have been connecting with each other, people that you haven't talked to in a very long time. So it's okay, whatever experience you're having. I think that that's the first thing that we want to say. The next thing is that it is really hard right now, especially if you are trying to meet your children's needs for everything that they unfortunately are not getting right now, because many of them are not in school. And that's really challenging, right? And I know there's been a lot of questions in general just about like, how am I supposed to be responsible for homeschooling my kid? And then for those of you who also work on top of that, right? Like, how am I supposed to homeschool and do my job? It's just not possible. So a couple of things here. I think one is the level of expectation that you place on yourself. It's important to kind of decrease what that's going to be right now, right? And it's okay if right now things are just kind of good enough. Things don't have to be perfect or great. I also think that you finding ways to manage some of your own stress that might be coming up when we're experiencing something that's hard, and we show that we can handle it, we are then modeling that for our children, and we create a mirror with them, and they're going to pick up on what's ever happening for us. So when you're showing that like you're going to figure out how to get through this and you can problem solve this and it's going to be okay, the chance that they're then going to be able to regulate their emotions with that is going to be much, much higher. Now, of course, that's not going to be 100% of the time. Also, like Danny was saying, you're saying you're dealing with sometimes special needs as well, right? So that's a completely different situation. But as best you can, whatever sort of coping skills you have right now, I think is really, really important. So I actually have been putting up, so if you go onto the Facebook page or the Instagram page that Danny's going to link, I have some content on there that's really helpful in terms of mental grounding skills, physical grounding skills, right? Like what's actually happening right now in terms of, I'll talk a little bit throughout this call about the idea of a window of tolerance, and when we get dysregulated, what happens with that. So things like in the moment doing a breathing exercise. That doesn't mean that you have to go off and leave your kid for 45 minutes and do a meditation. If you have time to do that, great. If you don't, that's fine. You can just be breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, regulating your heart rate in that present moment. Or you know what, you can say like, I just need to take a timeout, and that can be a 15-second timeout, right? You don't have to respond and react to everything that's happening right then and there. And then I think the last thing is, at the end of the day, when the kids do go to sleep, what are you doing to take that time, even if it's just 15 minutes, to give yourself that little recharge, right? Because I know a lot of people, and I was actually just saying this to my husband last night, so many people, because we're working from home right now, the lines are getting very blurred in terms of like what your work day is. So a lot of people are like working during the day, and then you're working more at night, and it's like you don't know what the expectation is. So it's okay in the evening to like give yourself a little bit of space to recharge, so that the next day you can get up and do this all over again, because that's kind of where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that me time is important, and what you're saying is that you can find it even in just a couple of seconds. You don't have to dedicate a 45-minute window to find me time. You can take a little time out and just basically take some time to refocus. All right.
Yeah. So, and again, those grounding skills that I have are going to be really important, because breathing exercises is one thing that a lot of people know about, but there's so many other really great tools that you can use in the moment that are really helpful, like clenching in your fist, breathing in, letting your fist out and breathing out, grabbing onto your chair, noticing colors or objects in the room around you, right? So doing things that are just going to bring you back to center, to the present moment, and being able to regulate your nervous system again.
Awesome. Okay. And that brings us over to our next question too, right? We're going to talk a little bit. We have some questions kind of about these coping strategies. So our next question says, kind of similar to what we were talking about, if we have to balance work and our children as a parent and our children's education, as well as any other roles or responsibilities we might have, right? So some parents are reporting by the end of the day, they just want to scream. They're ready to scream, right? So is there a strategy for this For example, some kind of morning meditation, mindfulness, breathing, de-stress. So I guess just kind of similar to what we were talking about in our first question, but I guess just maybe this question is talking about, is there a strategy for specifically planning ahead of time, like when those me times would be? So I guess being aware of the situation, how important it is to kind of plan ahead for those me times, times where you can practice some breathing or stress management or mindfulness, meditation, things like that.
Yeah, so I think there's two options here. So obviously everyone has a very different home situation. So I want to say that first, right? So some of us have spouses that we can talk with them, right, about like what our expectations of each other are going to be, what our personal boundaries and limits are. We can talk with them about like how we need help, right? And the idea of asking for help. Danny, hold on one second.
Um,
So I think if you have a partner at home that you're doing this with, then again, talking with them about how are you going to manage this time that you're at home. And again, depending on what your situation is with work, that's also going to guide how that day is going to go, right? So I often find that the morning might not be the best time because the mornings can just be so kind of crazy with like the get up and go and you're getting the kids ready, and like even though you're not getting out the door now, like it just kind of, you're doing breakfast. It's not the best time. I think at the end of the night when the kids go to sleep, I think that's an opportunity for you to talk with your partner about how you're going to both support each other during this, right? And how you're going to give each other the opportunity to take some of that kind of me time that you're talking about. If you're a single parent, right, that's going to look a lot different. And, so I think that it's important to give yourself permission if you are a single parent to find, once again, those moments. So it might not be this extended period of time. Like we hear this word self-care and we have this image of like, this long bubble bath with candles and like the whole thing. And yes, that is a form of self-care. But again, self-care can also just be giving yourself permission to take a pause for a second and to not be in that go, go, go mode. And I've worked with a lot of women over the years. I've specialized a lot in women's health, and I'll often hear women say the idea that like, as a mom, you don't always have the luxury of doing one thing at a time. And I get it. I have a 7-month-old. So it's like, I understand that sometimes you're doing a whole bunch of things at once. But if your kid is taking a 10-second pause, right, and they're like doing something where they're engaged in an activity, let that be your time to take that 10-second pause too. So find those moments with your kids, and also, like I was saying before, modeling your behavior so you can practice with them doing different mindfulness exercises also. Kids are great to do mindfulness with.
Well, what a perfect way to end that question, because our next question says, are there mindfulness, meditation, breathing strategies for de-stress that families can do together?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a benefit to sharing these activities as a family, even for youngsters?
Yeah, so breathing exercises are great. I think with kids, they also appreciate mindfulness exercises that may be more activity based. So here's the thing that I want to say about mindfulness or meditation, right? So they're kind of two different things. Mindfulness really just means awareness of the present moment. It's confused by all these different things. All it means is awareness. If you can just kind of think about it like what's happening in the here and now, that's what mindfulness is.
Mm-hmm.
So any activity that you're going to do that's going to bring you back to what's happening in the moment is going to be considered a mindfulness activity. So I do things with people like, and I actually put a video up about this the other day as well. I'll play a game like the traveling salesperson. So you'll go around within the family, right, and use letters of the alphabet. And you'll say your name, where you're from, and what you're selling. You'll like make up those 3 things, and you can go around and do that. Or you can do exercises like what I was talking about in the early part, where maybe you're going to do a grounding exercise with your kid. Like, okay, let's try and find as many colors in the room as we can together right now, right? Let's try and find as many objects as we can. Or sometimes I say like, kind of playing I Spy with yourself. So like, okay, let's try and find 4 things that are purple. Let's try and find 5 things that are square. You can do that with your 5 senses as well. Okay, so let's try and see if we can hear 2 different sounds that are going on in the room right now, right? So again, using your 5 senses as kind of like a way to bring yourself back to center. Another one that I like to do is imagining that you're at the beach and you're going to use a wave, and you're going to breathe in as the wave is going up, and you're going to breathe out as the wave is going down. With kids, you can pick any sort of like circular type of object that they connect with, and you can do the same thing. So as the part of the circle is coming up, you're breathing in, and as part of the circle is going out, you're breathing out. There are so many different ideas. So my recommendation also is to go onto YouTube and just type in grounding exercises or breathing exercises or meditation. And then I would also encourage you to go onto YouTube and type in breathing exercises for kids, right? Or grounding exercises for kids. And then that way you're also engaging with them, and you're having them engage in learning and teaching themselves these skills also. So then it becomes like a whole family conversation.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. And I know in my schooling, they talk a lot about grounding through the senses too, where you name, 5 things that you can see, and, 4 things that you can hear, and 3 things that you can smell, and just kind of making that awareness, like you said, that mindfulness is really just an awareness. And when you bring it to all the senses, right, and you can play it as a game, almost as an I Spy game to get, the children involved. That's really good. I like that.
So one of the things that I do want to say about that too is there is a scientific reason for that also. So what happens when we get what we call emotionally hijacked is that the part of our brain that's responsible for thinking, as adults, it shuts down. Kids actually don't have that part of their brain fully developed. So that's our frontal lobe part of our brain, right? And so they don't have the same level of self-regulation tools that we do as adults. And that's why I'm talking about the importance of us modeling that for them. So when we get emotionally hijacked, it's almost like we go back to a childlike state, and we're going to react to the emotional experience that we're having in the moment. So for some of us, that means screaming. For some of us, that means leaving the room. For some of us, that means shutting down, right? For some of us, that means attaching to another person. And so these grounding tools, the reason for them is that they allow you to have your brain, what we call, come back online. So you're not hijacked by your emotions, and it reactivates that frontal lobe part of your brain that's responsible for being able to think logically.
Very interesting. Awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing that. So that's very interesting. I didn't know that. All right. So our next question says, and I know we talked a lot about different strategies and mindfulness techniques and family activities. So I don't know if you're going to have anything else to add. But this question says, are there other ways to balance or take the pressure off, not to feel exhausted and overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm. So, again, I think there's a lot of things that people feel like they have to do right now. And this could be a time where maybe you're going to take the pressure off a little bit, right? And have moments where you're not going to be doing things that you have to do. So again, can you take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes and say, you know what, we're going to close this activity for a while, or we're going to close these books for a while, like if you're doing homeschooling with your kids, right? Or we're going to stop what we're doing right now, and we're just going to take 5 minutes, right? We're just going to give ourselves a timeout, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever amount of time that you have, and giving yourself permission to not be in quote unquote work mode, right? To just kind of take a pause. Because I'll tell you, like, even myself, I feel like I've just been in this like constant go, go, go with everything that's been going on, and trying to, give support where I can. And yesterday I finally took a pause and was really thinking about everything that's happening. And it's like, if you're not allowing yourself to do that, you're not really fully processing everything that's going on. And the difficulty with that is that then you have after effects. So it's kind of like when we go through an earthquake, right? And then we have the aftershocks. That's kind of like what's happening here. So it's important to be able to find ways to process what's currently happening, so it's not coming up as much later on. Now, that's not 100% avoidable, right? On an emotional level, there's going to be after effects of this. That's going to happen. But finding ways to mitigate the severity of that is what I'm kind of getting at here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I have a good friend of mine too, who like a strategy that he practices is that sometimes if he's feeling rushed and overwhelmed, he kind of just pauses and starts laughing, just laughing at the situation, laughing at the circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of
Yeah.
just takes away from the fact of like, we're rushing and all this pressure is sometimes just internally we're putting this pressure on ourselves.
Right.
And here you kind of just pause and laugh about it, and it just like changes the perspective to a less serious one, just kind of accepting that like it's okay to not be exactly where I think I need to be right now or what I need to do. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's a good one.
And there's a skill actually that's kind of similar to that. So it's a skill called half smile, and it's not like putting a big grin on your face, but it's just ever so slightly arching your mouth up. And they've done studies to show that that signals to the brain that you're in a more positive mood.
Hmm.
So I could see how, taking a pause and just having some random laughter would also have that same effect. I mean, we know that when we are genuinely laughing with people, right, that we feel better. So
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of chemistry that kind of goes on, when we have an experience like this.
Right. All right. Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. This next question says, how do I control my own emotions and temper if I am exhausted and want to scream, ready to lash out? So I think it's kind of asking like in that moment, where we're trying to plan ahead, we're trying to pause, we're doing the best we can, but in a moment where we're just ready, we've had enough, we're totally overwhelmed, totally overstressed, ready to just explode, lash out, scream. In that moment, is there something that can be done? How do we
Yeah.
control that moment?
So a couple of things that are going to be important there. So again, that's a great example of being hijacked by our emotions. When we're hijacked by our emotions, we're not thinking. So we have to remember that, right? That thinking part of our brain is not activated. So the best thing I tell people to do is paying attention to your body sensation. So usually I'll use the example of anxiety, but anger is a really great one to use too, right? So when we have those types of emotions, we're going to have body responses, right? We might have racing heart, we might clench our fists, we might have a stomach ache, we might have racing thoughts, we might have a headache, our hands might get clammy, right? Our body getting sweaty. So if I can't think, then it's probably not going to be realistic for me in that moment to be like, I'm really angry right now and I need to take a break, right? That's not what's going to happen. You're just angry and you're going to react. So we want to condition ourselves, and this is something we kind of have to practice over and over again if this is not something we're used to. We call them fire drill skills. So basically the idea is when you hear a fire drill go off, because you've been conditioned for so long, you just leave the building, right? You don't think about it, you just hear the fire drill and you leave.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want to do when we're hijacked by our emotions too. So you're going to notice the body sensations, and over time of practicing this and asking yourself, what do I need to do right now in this moment? You're going to come up with an idea. And sometimes what that means is leaving the room for, again, if it's 30 seconds that you have because your kid's throwing a temper tantrum and you can't leave them for an extended period of time, that's fine. Would you rather take 30 seconds to leave the room and potentially leave them having the temper tantrum, or would you rather stay in there and have this like lashing out experience? So most of my clients would say, well, I'd rather try and figure out how to deal with it in a more calm way. So I think that's one option. If you can walk out of the room for 30 seconds just to take some deep breaths, try and ground yourself really quickly in that moment, then that's going to be beneficial. If you don't have that luxury of walking out of the room, just kind of envisioning a stop sign in your head. And then the acronym STOP you can use as well. So the S stands for stop. The T stands for take a step back. The O stands for observe. And the P stands for proceed mindfully. So you're going to picture a stop sign, right? And once you have that in your mind, you're going to take a couple of deep breaths. And then you're going to figure out how you're going to deal with the situation that's happening in front of you. Right?
Awesome.
So that hijacking of the brain, we don't want that to be where our behavior is being driven from. We want to come from a more grounded place if we're going to be able to control what's going on.
So almost like an awareness that I'm not able to think clearly and rationally right now.
That's right.
instead of trying to force myself when I feel like screaming and I'm overwhelmed, either get out of there and take a moment to think about it, or
Mhm.
kind of just pause with that stop sign, like
Yeah.
visual imagining, almost imagery, mental imagery, I would say.
That's right. Yeah. And um, what I typically say to people, you're mentioning like kind of not being present, right? I usually say to people, think of it like whoever you are is kind of like out the window, and whatever emotion you're experiencing, that's what's showing up in the room in the moment.
Mm,
Right? So it's not even you. It's just the emotion that is driving what's happening right there. And there's a big difference between reaction and response. And reaction is I have an emotion and then something happens as a result of that emotion. And response is I have an emotion, I take a step back and think about it, and then I figure out how I want to proceed.
very interesting. This is good. This is such a good conversation.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So, and this brings us to our last question. All right. Um, and so part of this question says how to handle my own stress, anxiety to not transfer it to my child. But I think you did a pretty good job of just explaining a bunch of different strategies and ways to kind of make sure that, we're doing the best, or parents are doing the best to take care of themselves, and how important it is to model, those behaviors to their children. But the second part of this question says, should a parent be discussing what is happening in the world with their child?
Right.
So that open
So I
communication.
think that's going to really depend on how old your kid is, right? And how much they understand. And then you also mentioned that you have some kids who may have special needs. So their cognitive level of understanding of things, right? Obviously, everybody knows that something is different right now. So they may or may not be able to articulate that into words, again, depending on their age and any disability that they might have. But it doesn't matter. The point is that they know that something has changed. And whether we are an adult or we are a child, the reality is that we all kind of thrive on the idea of structure, routine. You see that when you have, so I have, like I said, a 7-month-old, and one of the biggest topics, that comes up when you have a new baby is sleep, right? And so over and over again, I obsessed about this topic of sleep, and luckily now we're kind of, in a new place on that. But what kept coming up over and over again was the idea of creating a sleep routine, right? To cue their brain to know that it was time for sleep. And we do that every single day when you think about it, right? Like when you wake up in the morning, you have a routine for how you get ready for your day. And then when your kids go to school, they have a very, very, very structured routine while they are there. So that's why you see all these posts right now that are coming out about creating routine at home, because everybody's feeling out of whack, because you don't have your regular routine. So I think it's, again, kind of giving yourself a break, right? And understanding that we are all going to be a little bit out of sorts while we don't have that normal structure and routine that we're used to. And as a result of that, what that's doing is it's creating what we call a vulnerability factor for us. So a vulnerability factor is anything where we are more likely to react to our emotions because there's something else going on. So you've heard of the term like being hangry, right? That's a great example of it, right? Like some people, when they're really hungry, like they're kind of cranky and you might like lash out at your partner. And
Mhm,
then once you get some food in you, it's like all of a sudden you're this whole new person. That's
mhm.
a great example of that. So this pandemic is a major vulnerability factor, right? Think about like being hungry, but like times 50. That's what's happening right now.
Right.
So giving yourself a break for that, right? Understanding that you don't have any control over what's going on around you right now. And that also can be really frustrating and uncomfortable because we like to have control. So, you know, I think it's trying to, as much as you can, be a little easier on yourself, right? What does that idea of self-compassion look like for you? There's a great website, Kristen Neff. She does a lot of work on self-compassion. She has a website with different exercises that you can check out. I can put that link below too. Self-validation strategies, like I'm doing the best I can right now, you know, and I don't have control, and that's going to be okay, and I'm going to figure it out. So it's a lot of self-talk, I think, when you're an adult. And so again, when it's this question of like, do I talk to my kids about this or not? I think you have to base that on your own personal situation. And then if you're talking to your kids about it, maybe you're talking to them if they're older about specifically what's happening in the world. But if you don't feel like they're going to understand that, what you can at least talk to them about is how their routine is different right now and how that must be really hard for them. And I think really just calling attention to the emotions that might be coming up for them, like, how do you feel about the fact that like you're not in school right now, or that your friends are not with you, right? Or how does it feel to be at home during the day? Like, is there anything you need to talk about, and kind of opening up that conversation. And some kids, if they're older, will be able to articulate that, right? And some, if they're younger, are not. So for when they're on the younger end, you're going to pick up on emotions that they may be displaying, and then you can name that emotion for them so they learn how to name their own emotions.
Mm.
Does that make sense? So, right. So if you see your kid crying, right, because they want to go to school, you might say something to them like, I know it's really hard and you must be feeling really sad right now that you can't go to school with your friends. I know this is really hard. We're going to figure out how we're going to get through this together. And then that way you're modeling for them two things, right? One, it is okay for you to have vulnerable feelings. And two, there are ways to manage your vulnerable feelings. Those are the two most important things that we as adults need to learn, and then that we need to model for our children.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties everything together also, like just the fact that it's okay for us to feel vulnerable as adults, as parents, as caregivers, caretakers, for us to feel vulnerable, and, and just modeling that behavior for our children, that it's okay to feel vulnerable. And then kind of, knowing that it's okay, and lowering those expectations, so we're not putting such a high demand for everything to be perfect and exactly as we're imagining that it has to be,
Right.
that expectation one step lower, and then just kind of problem solving. And especially if you open it to, your children, depending on their age or different abilities or different emotional, cognitive, levels, like you said, just kind of having like that open communication, and just supporting one another, and really kind of figuring it out together,
Mm-hmm.
kind
That's
of,
great.
yeah.
And if you do have a quote unquote freak out, it's also about coming back later to your kids and just saying to them, like, I'm sorry that I reacted that way. I was feeling really angry and frustrated in the moment. I'm going to work on finding other ways to manage that moving forward, and we will work on that together. So that's also another way. Like, we're human and we're going to make mistakes. And I'm a full on believer that like nobody's perfect. So you're going to have moments where you're going to get frustrated and you're going to get upset and you're going to have a reaction, and also giving yourself a break for that too, right? Like, sometimes we need to have an adult temper tantrum. Like, that's the way I look at it. And if you have an adult temper tantrum, that's okay, as long as then you do some sort of corrective experience about it with your kids or with your partner, because we can certainly be freaking out on them right now too, right?
Right, right. So like, allowing that to happen, and just kind of brainstorming of not focusing too much about that experience, but what we're going to do about it now.
That's right. And that's practicing that mindfulness that we talked about.
Right. Kate, I got to give you a round of applause. That
Thank
was
you.
awesome.
Yeah,
Wow.
thank you. I'm so glad that we did this. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people who are definitely trying to just figure out, one of the things that I just want to say as we're kind of wrapping up here is, and I've been saying this all week long, like, this is a situation that we have never really dealt with on this level. And when we have things that happen in the world, we look for, I mean, there's a reason that they teach us history in school, right? I mean, personally, it wasn't my favorite subject.
Mhm.
But I will just say that there's a reason that they teach it, because we use what's happened in the past as evidence for how to deal with a situation in the present. And because we've literally not dealt with something like this, again, on this scale, we're very confused and we don't know what to do. And so we're kind of figuring it out as we go. And that's why I'm saying to be easy on yourself, because everybody's in that same boat. It's this shared experience. I put something up today about like the shared experience of pain. And that's really, we're all kind of in this, just figuring it out together.
And yeah, and this has been, just awesome, awesome education. And again, I'm so thankful and happy that you are sharing your knowledge and your, skill set and your perspective, because I feel like it really can, on a global level, help. Like, so many people do need to hear this. I mean, myself included. You know, how many times do we place such high pressure on ourselves that, you know, we're stressing out over, you know, the level that we're hoping to get, those expectations we're putting on
Yeah.
ourselves.
And this is a whole new experience for us as therapists too, you know, like so many therapists that I know have been saying right now, like this is one of the first times where I'm going through a situation and experience at the same time as my clients are. And
Mhm.
it's true, right? Like we are in this too with you guys. And I think we're all just doing the best that we can to try and hold space for what's going on for people's feelings, to be that emotional container for what people need right now, you know. So I'm a big proponent of like, if you need to go talk to somebody, even if it's just for like a couple of sessions, right? This doesn't need to be like a long-term thing unless you want it to be, but it's important, like if you need support, to go and talk to somebody about specific tools for your particular situation, because as you're saying today and as I said, these are general ideas, right? But if you go and you talk to somebody, then you're also going to be able to get specific tools for your dynamic that's going on in your home.
Of course, right, right. Support one another, reach out, ask for help, right. And of course, working with somebody individually, if you need, is a great way to get personal, individual strategies that can be used specifically for how you're feeling and your situation in this global situation that's happening.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for sure.
Hey, oh man, wow, that was awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for
Welcome.
your time.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, and I'm going to put all of Kate's contact information and social media pages down in our comments, in our first comments, so you can always, you know, check out. I know Kate's posting a bunch of different resources and even hosting workshops and different things just to learn, you know, additional strategies and ways that we can, you know, kind of just take care of ourselves and support ourselves and have the skills to support our families and our friends, our communities. So I'll put all that information down. And again, just want to end just saying that please remember that this is just educational information, right? So of course, one-on-one, you know, professional advice is different than this. This is just global educational information, just to support one another, just good information as we've all heard, but you know, not specific strategies for anybody. So just please, you know, be mindful, be careful of how you're, you know, all this information. And, you know, if you need to consult with your own doctor and provider before doing so, you know, before taking any of these strategies, please do so. Right. So with that being said, thank you everybody who did tune in. And I hope this information is helpful. And again, hope everybody's feeling good, staying healthy, taking care of themselves. And again, we'll have Kate's information below if you want to reach out, and hope everyone stays well.
Thank
Right?
you.
Thank you, everybody.